My name is Brock, and this is the Dungeon Master's Toolkit podcast. Welcome, everybody. Today I have a one-shot that we are going to be talking about. And for anybody who is curious, I have the one-shot pulled up in front of me, and I'm going to be talking through all of the information that's in the one-shot. But if you would like to get a text write-up of the notes, you can actually jump over to the Patreon and you can grab it over there. I put a text post out already. It's already live before I even recorded this. So any patrons can go over there and pick it up, and then I'll maybe do more of a full PDF release at some point in the future. But for now, this is what we have. So this is the Blackwood Manor one-shot. So this is a Halloween-themed one-shot that I put together in about 24 hours because we very last minute decided to have some family come over, and I've been trying to get this family to start a D&D campaign, and we kind of spur of the moment, we're like, hey, you guys should come over this weekend. We'll play some board games or whatever. You guys can spend the night, and it'll be a fun time. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to put together a session. I'm going to try to keep it relatively short, maybe a half an hour for character creation, and then maybe an hour to an hour and a half runtime. That way, if we don't want to play role-playing games the whole night, we can, have some time to do some other stuff. So that was kind of the goal behind it. It was very last minute. We were kind of doing Halloween-themed stuff already, so I wanted to keep that theme going. And then I needed to be able to control the pacing really well for this so that I could keep things moving and that we could get on to the rest of the night for the rest of the things that we had planned without this dragging on and taking too long. So I will come out and say that the first were one of those things, the time, we actually did spend 3 hours playing because the session was going so well. So that was not necessarily planned, but it worked out really, really well. So as far as a one-shot goes, you could definitely run this in a night. There's definitely enough meat here that you could take a couple of hours to get through everything. It actually took a little bit longer than I was expecting just to get through some of the early encounters. So that's kind of the background for where this inspiration came from. And like I said, I put this together in about 24 hours, or I didn't take a whole 24 hours, but that's about how much time I had to prep. So the other thing, I tried a prep method that Mike Shea from Sly Flourish has talked about in some of his Lazy Dungeon Master books. I don't have his books specifically, but I've been watching a lot of his videos and his podcasts and kind of learning about how he does his prep, and this worked extremely well. And so there's kind of two pieces to it. They're kind of in the same hand here. I have two tables or lists, I guess. One is events and encounters, and then the other one is secrets and clues. And he kind of talks about he talks more about the secrets and clues portion in his prep, and I kind of did the same thing for the events and encounters, which I'll get to in just a second. And that lets you just kind of control the pacing on things a little bit better. So what he says about secrets and clues is you should come up with a list of about 10, maybe 20 secrets and clues that your players can discover during the next session that you're running. So this could be little bits of lore. It could be weaknesses of your big bad. It could be, information about where to find certain things, right? Just to have a bunch of readily available information that is specific to the game that they're playing and to the session. So, the campaign as a whole and specifically to that session, things that they're likely going to find out. One of the big pieces of this, though, is that you don't specify where, who, or when any of these secrets come up. So you leave that open. It could be that an NPC tells them something. They could find a journal that has some documentation about one of these secrets. They could find an item that kind of portrays this information, right? They could have a vision. There are different ways in which the secrets and clues can be worked in to this session. And what that does is it allows you to pick the secret or the clue that you want to give them in the moment, and the delivery method. You can improvise that piece of it. You're not improvising the details, you're improvising the delivery, and it makes it ended up being really satisfying. And the key to the basement is one of those secrets. And I will go through all of these and talk about kind of how the session played out. But the key to the basement is one where I didn't have a specific location for it to be. And the way it was found worked out really, really nicely. So we'll get to that when we get kind of back to the secrets and clues section. But I really like that idea of just having a list of things and then being able to pick and choose when it makes sense. You could even roll if you weren't sure. You could just roll a d10 and pick whichever one it is. But it makes it so things flow a lot better in my single experience of actually using this. It also helps with the fact that you don't know if, in this situation, if players are going to search a specific room, if an NPC is going to die. I've seen a lot of times online, people will talk about, well, this one NPC had all this information, and then they died like right away in the session. Now that information is locked behind that character. This method prevents that from happening, because if the NPC didn't tell you, then you can find that information somewhere else in some other way. It didn't have to be the NPC, right? So that is extremely helpful. Now, I did essentially the same thing with the events and encounters. So I didn't, with the exception of a couple of kind of key encounters, I have 10. Do I have 10? I have 8 encounters that I had planned out. A couple of them are specific that needed to happen kind of at a certain point in the session, which I have detailed, and we'll go over this. So for the most part, these are just kind of encounters that would make sense to happen at the location. And then I could pick and choose to slot them in where they made sense and when I needed them to adjust pacing, to adjust, if we've had too much combat or not enough combat, I could kind of pick and choose ones to add in. If I wanted some environmental stuff, I could throw that in. And I will go through all of these with you guys on the episode as well in just a minute. So now that I'm kind of working backwards, I talked about the secrets and clues, I talked about the events and encounters, and then I'm going to talk about the actual session, the actual like one shot, what the kind of game flow is supposed to be. And then I will actually go through one by one of each of the events and each of the secrets and clues, and we'll be good to go. So you can take this and run this on Halloween if you would like. So this is Blackwood Manor, and I actually used a Che Peku map, Grand Hunter's House. So I used that map, the upper and lower floor, and I also included a link to a YouTube video that just has some like Haunted Mansion style music, just for some ambience and a map that you can go find. And so the game flow, the kind of overarching idea here, is that you have been invited to Gideon Blackwood's manor. He's a big game hunter. He's probably knows the local nobility pretty well, or is part of the local nobility. You've been invited to this dinner party at his house. So it's you, it's your party, and then a couple of other NPCs. And the goal is that you have to survive the attack. There is a zombie attack that happens almost immediately at the beginning of the session. To kick things off, you need to survive, find a key to the basement, and then you find out that in the basement there is a coffin with some symbols on it, and there are some candles around the coffin, and you have to destroy the candles, and then that undoes the curse or the ritual or whatever that's happening, and you can kind of end the session. Okay, so that's like the general flow. You get invited to a dinner party, you get attacked by zombies, you got to find the key to the basement, and then destroy the candles so that you can lift the curse and escape. So before the game, I have a series here of things that I had written down for myself as to like, hey, when are these key events supposed to happen? So before the game, at 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, and at the end of the session, because I was planning to run this in a condensed time frame. But you can just take these as key events to spread out, as it makes sense, right? So the like 30 minutes is going to be about your halfway point. 45 is going to be, 75% of the way through. 60 minutes is kind of at the end, and then there's the, like, after the end of the session. So, before the game, during character creation, why did Gideon Blackwood invite you tonight? So that is the one question that the players need to answer for why they are sitting around this dinner table with a couple of NPCs. And we'll go over the NPCs in just a minute. There's also some quoted text here, or some italicized text here, for just, you can just straight up read this off, which is what I did during the session. So, you've been formally invited to a small dinner party at Gideon Blackwood's lodge. Gideon is a close associate of the Duke and renowned big game hunter. His lodge is decorated with his taxidermy trophies. And you can see in that map by Chepeku, there's a bunch of like random, there's a whole room that has a bunch of taxidermy, but like almost every room has like one animal in it. At 15 minutes, announce the underbelly secret. That is, Gideon keeps something locked away in the basement. Nobody is allowed down there. A single key unlocks the door. If you're worried that the players are going to try to destroy the door, make it like an iron door or something that's unbreakable, it's magically sealed. Only the key can open it, so they don't just brute force it. At 30 minutes, players find a clue telling where the key to the basement is in an upstairs room. So the key to the basement is another secret and clue that I had, which is just a small cellar key found in a room upstairs, and then once found, summon the boss, which we will get to in a minute. So 30 minutes, basically, if they haven't found that key, tell them where it is. Have an NPC say they thought they saw it here or whatever, and then let them find it, because we're trying to speed things along here. At 45 minutes, the players find the key if they haven't already. Like, just throw it in their face. Oh, look, there it is. And then spawn the marble dragon in the stairwell. So the marble dragon is the boss. We'll talk about the kind of two main enemies that we have in this session in a minute. Actually, we'll talk about them now. So there was two main enemies. There's these like spirit things. So maybe it would be good to talk about the zombie break-in encounter, which is the first one. So zombie break-in. At the beginning of the session, the groundskeeper bursts through the door, shouting "Blood Moon." A few moments later, a handful of zombies break into the room from the doors and the windows. When killed, a dark, smoky shadow leaves the possessed corpse and flees deeper into the manor to possess something else. So already we have the zombies that attack, but it's not really the zombies. It's the fact that there are these like shadow spirits that are making their way around the mansion, possessing stuff and attacking the players. And every time they get killed, whatever, like if they run out of HP essentially, or if they're in an object and the object runs out of HP, it doesn't kill it. They flee somewhere else into the house to cause more problems, right? Oh, and one of the other encounters is the arcane seal. So after the zombies have entered the house is sealed by arcane energy, trapping everyone inside until they can find a way to undo the magic. That's where those candles comes into play in the basement. So there's a reason why they can't just like flee. There's arcane magic that's locking them in the house. So that's our first two encounters out of the way. So then at the 45 minutes, if they haven't found the key, we're going to spawn the marble dragon in the stairwell, which is the boss. So this is, again, based on the actual map. There's a big stairwell in the middle of the map that goes to the upstairs level. And there's a big marble statue with like a person and some kind of like a dragon-looking thing. And basically the spirits at this point, they've been possessing random stuff in the house. They coalesce and they all feed themselves into the marble statue and become this giant marble dragon that the players now have to deal with. So once they have found the key to the basement and they make their way back to the stairwell, you can read this text, which says, as you make your way to the stairway, you notice the tendrils of shadows feeding themselves into the marble statue of the dragon. It shudders and breaks free from its resting place. So now you've got a boss to deal with. At 60 minutes, the players have entered the basement and destroyed the coffin and candles. Ethereal blue light flickers as you enter the basement. This is what you would read when you come into the basement, sorry. So this is, players have entered the basement. Ethereal blue light flickers as you enter the basement. A large wooden coffin lies at the center of the room, adorned with golden vampiric symbols. 5 glowing ritual candles surround the coffin. Okay? And all they have to do is knock the candles out. Then at session end, as the last candle fades, the curse lifts, the arcane barrier flickers away, the shadows wail as they become powerless, fleeing into the night. Dawn breaks on the eastern windows of the lodge. Only 2 questions remain. Where was Gideon Blackwood this night, and what is his next move? And that is how I turned this one-shot into a campaign with my group. But now let's actually talk through the NPCs that we have. So there's 4 other NPCs really that are in this one shot. So the first NPC is the groundskeeper, Old Man Witherby. He's a hunched elderly man with a scruffy beard and calloused hands. He's always seen in his worn out hat and overalls. His eyes are aged, and he, has unspoken stories and kind, gentle wisdom. You've got the painter, Lady Elise Montclair. She's a middle-aged woman, and she has, paint in her hair and probably on her clothes. She always looks a little bit disheveled. She's a close friend of Gideon's wife and has helped his wife with various commissioned paintings, essentially. One of the rooms in the upstairs of the map is a large painting room, and actually a hidden painting room as well, or like storage room, which kind of become useful later on. So if you can't tell already, I've used a lot of inspiration from the map itself to build this story, and fitting people and things in that would make sense, just for the location, because that's what we had. And then we've got hunting buddy Sir Reginald Fairway. So he's a robust man in his late 40s with a hearty laugh and a penchant for embellishing tales of his hunting exploits. He's a hunting buddy to Gideon. They've gone on many expeditions to rare and exotic creatures. So he hangs out at the lodge a lot during hunting season. And we also have the head servant, Miss Agatha Hainsworth. So a stern-looking woman with her hair always slightly pulled back. She doesn't show a lot of emotions, and she's impeccably straight, and her uniform is always clean, and whatever. Just very kind of stereotypical characters that we have here that could exist in the lodge. And then we have kind of a handful of unnamed servants that may be running around helping with preparing food or whatever. But these are kind of the 4 main named NPCs. By mention, Gideon Blackwood is mentioned and his wife is mentioned. I didn't name his wife, but they don't show up physically in the session. So you don't necessarily need to worry about having them on hand because they're not at the manor. So the monsters that we talked about, we've got the Shadow Spirit. So we were playing this in index card RPG, so I made things simple. 10 HP, so 1 heart. It's got a +1 to all stats. It can possess objects. So whenever it's in an object, it's not vulnerable to light, which is the other thing that it has. When it's defeated or the object is destroyed, it flees somewhere else for a couple of rounds and possesses something. It may then... We'll get to the encounters. Having them flee into the manor gave me a reason to be able to have these encounters happen kind of whenever. So as the players would move room to room, I could trigger the next encounter that kind of made sense for the situation. And then we had the vulnerability to light. So light damage or radiant damage does automatic critical damage to the spirits. If a spirit is not currently possessing an object and it's killed by light damage, it was fully destroyed. That actually came out during gameplay. I had not planned that originally. We had an event that happened, and it just made so much sense for that to happen the way it did. So I just added that in because it was a really cool moment for the player, which we will talk about when I get to that encounter. And so there is a way for them to destroy the spirits before they've released the curse, but for the most part, they just flee into the manor to cause more problems. I originally tried to have 5 spirits moving about. backing that off to 4 because I only had 3 player characters, and there was, action economy wise, I didn't necessarily need to have 5, and I didn't really want it to be a super deadly game. I wanted them to survive and be able to finish. The Marble Dragon, I gave it 10 hit points per spirit that was possessing it. So if you had 3, you'd give it 30 health. If it had 5, you could give it 50 health. I didn't do this in the game, but in the notes, I put stats +1 to all stats per spirit that possesses it. Again, I didn't end up using that, but it's an option that you could play with. And it has chunks, which I'll get to in just a second. Actually, I'll get to the chunks now. So each 10 HP lost, the dragon loses a limb, and one of the controlling spirits flees into the manor. So as you're kind of doing enough damage to it, you're chipping off pieces of the marble dragon. The spirit that was in that chunk leaves. That would also mean that its stats would come down. So if it was 4 spirits, they have 40 health, +4 to all rolls. Well, if you do 10 damage to it, okay, now it's under 30 health. It's got +3 to all stats now. Right, so you can kind of have this like weakening effect if you want. This is all like kind of homebrewed stuff anyways, so do whatever you want. I also gave it a Shadow Breath, which it didn't get a chance to use, exhaling an area of thick shadows that damages and blinds the victim. This is Index card RPG, so I didn't really come up with like how much damage that does, because in Index card RPG, it would just do like energy damage or magic damage, so it would just be a D10, and I don't have to think about it, so I just left that as is. All the players only had 10 health anyways, so a D10 is scary because I can knock them out potentially. And then another ability was just slash, so the dragon bites or claws at players with its limbs or tail. So bite, claw, tail, and that would just do weapon damage in Index card RPG, which is a D6. And that was the 2 enemies that we had. And so the spirits, they would possess an object. It didn't matter if it was a zombie, if it was a taxidermy thing, if it was a chair. I just did all damage was the same, right? It's a D6. It's just like blunt force attacks, right? So nothing too complicated there in terms of like damage types or any of that fun stuff. Okay. So I've already talked about actually 3 of the encounters. We've talked about the zombie break-in, the arcane seal, and the marble dragon. Those are the things that are for sure going to happen. And actually the Blackwood coffin is technically on here as an encounter as well. So that's 4. So those 4 things are for sure going to happen at some point. The key, so I did say that the marble dragon, once the key is found, shadows possess the marble dragon, and the statue comes to life along the main staircase. The only thing that I wanted to specify with the key is that the key would be found upstairs, which would force them to then have to go back to the stairwell to pass the marble dragon to get to the basement. It's the only reason why I have that in there. So the next 4 encounters that I have are completely optional. That could happen or not happen, depending on what the pacing and timing was that I needed, or what just made sense in the story. So room of mimics. The shadows have taken to inanimate objects in this room, a chair, a chest, a rug, attempting to subdue the players, right? That encounter didn't end up happening when we played the session, so I don't have much to say on that, but it's there if you need it. Soul Kiss. So this is, think of the Dementors from Harry Potter. Upon entering a room, players find a servant's soul being sucked from their body by one of the shadows. They must act quickly, or the shadow will devour and possess the servant, becoming superhuman. So I was just going to give it like a stat bump if it was successful in consuming the soul and then possessing the body. What I did here, ICRPG suggests that you use timers. So the players heard a scream from the other room. They came and checked it out. One of the spirits was over the head servant and was doing this. I rolled a D4 for my timer and said, okay, you've got 2 rounds before it devours her soul and possesses her. And they managed to, it didn't fight back or anything. It didn't do anything to the players. It was just focused on trying to kill the servant. And so they just had 2 rounds to try and deal with it before that happened. And they managed to knock it out in 1 round. So it just fled farther into the manor again. And then that servant was saved. So that was good. Poltergeist. Several objects in a room float ominously, defying gravity. Getting close will fling the objects at the nearest player, save, or take damage. So I like to use save as a phrase for when I want them to make some sort of a roll to avoid something, but I'm not gonna specify like, oh, you have to make a dex check, you have to make a con save, right? I'm gonna let them tell me what they're gonna do, and then see if they can avoid it with that roll. So if they can think on their feet and do something really cool, they can roll with whatever stat they want to if they can justify. And this actually happened. I had it poltergeist like 3 chairs, and one of the players just didn't quite catch on to what was happening, and she walked in and got hit from every angle by the chairs and took damage, and was like, okay, yep, I realized what just happened and that I shouldn't have walked in here. Just completely kind of went over her head, but that's okay. This one is less of a combat and more of an environmental type thing, because they have to deal with these floating things that aren't necessarily trying to attack them straight out. It's not like attack rolls and hitting them. It's kind of a one and done thing, kind of a minefield. And then the last one is living taxidermy. The shadows will possess the various taxidermy creatures throughout the manor. So again, just gives them a different body or frame to be in to attack the players. This one also didn't come up, and if it would have, I would probably give the spirits, abilities that kind of make sense for the animal, right? Like I think there's a large snake in one of the rooms, and there's a big wolf and a bear, right? Have the bear pin him on the ground, have the snake, wrap somebody up to try to strangle them, that sort of a thing. So those are the 8 encounters that could happen in any order, in any room, for the most part, with the exception of those key encounters that we talked about. Now we're going to talk about the secrets and clues, and then I have a special fun little bit when we get to the occult paintings. So secrets and clues, the first one, underbelly. Gideon keeps something locked away in the basement. Nobody is allowed down there. A single key unlocks the door. That's something they should find out fairly early on, so that they know that they're looking for a key. The second secret and clue is a key to the basement. A small key found in a room upstairs. Once found, summon the boss. So the key was an interesting one, because I didn't know where they were going to find the key, and it worked out really well. One of the players went into the taxidermy room. He convinced the other two NPCs to come with him and help him search the room for just stuff, right? Just anything useful. And so I asked him, like, okay, as you're going through searching for stuff, like, how are you searching a taxidermy room, right? And he was swinging his daggers and sword at everything. He was just like chopping the heads off of the taxidermy stuff, just ripping the entire room to shreds, basically. And on the map, it's all taxidermy stuff. So it's like his trophy room, right? Gideon's trophy room, of where all the like big animals are. And actually, I think I have another secret related to the room that just says favorite taxidermy. Gideon keeps his favorite taxidermy trophies in a room on the 2nd floor, which was one that they had found out already. And so he's in there and he's slashing everything up. And I was like, this seems like a good time for them to find the key. So he slices the alligator's head off, and it falls to the ground, and the key kind of clanks across the floor. And so what I said was, he had hidden the key in the head of the crocodile, or the alligator, whatever it was. So whenever he wanted to go into the basement, he could come in to his taxidermy room that probably most people don't really want to be in there. Stick your hand down the alligator's mouth, and right there, kind of hooked on the inside of the alligator's head, that's where he would have the key at. And that piece of it was improvised on the fly in the moment after that player decided to go in and just cut everything in the room to shreds. And I think that was a very satisfying way for them to find the key. And as Gideon, as a character who is very secretive, it made sense for him, right? He's not hiding stuff in in his desk, he's making it hard for people to be able to find his secrets. So then we have Midnight Painter, and I have kind of two related to the paintings here. So this is another situation where we had a funny encounter, or a very good encounter. So Midnight Painter, Gideon's wife, has been painting pictures of occult creatures and rituals, but the paintings disappear, never seen leaving the house. And then the other clue here is occult paintings. The occult paintings in the hidden room depict vampiric symbols and rituals. So on the map, there's a big painter's room, and then there's a little balcony that goes out, and it kind of comes over, and then there's this little storage room that looks like it has some paintings that have like a big tarp that's laid over them. And I had the painter lady, the NPC, kind of convey some of this information when they were asking questions and stuff and kind of exploring the upstairs, and said that she had heard rumors of this, but she'd never actually seen these pictures. And so when they found out that there's this hidden room, the player was expecting something to attack. I didn't have anything planned. It was just going to be a storage room of these occult paintings, right? So I hadn't planned anything to attack, but he spent so much time, like, he narrated him and the hunting buddy, Sir Reginald, like, he ordered him to stand in a certain spot, get his rifle ready, and then he had his daggers ready, and he's gonna, he's like kicking the door open, and I'm gonna go in like with my daggers ready to just like hit whatever I can. Or no, it wasn't the daggers, it was, he had his crossbow out. So he did this whole setup of like, we're breaching this room, and if there's something in here, it's gonna be dead. And as he is planning this out, I didn't have a plan for there to be a spirit in the room, but I was like, there's no way that I can, this is a golden opportunity. I can't let this golden opportunity go to waste. I need to use this because he is so invested in this moment. It has to have a payoff. So what I did was, the occult paintings are in there, and he opens the door, and one of the occult paintings has a spirit on it, and the spirit comes out of the painting and attacks immediately, takes a swipe at him. And so he's like, I knew it, and he's fighting back, and he stumbles, but he takes a hit, he stumbles backwards. Sir Reginald kind of goes in and tries to bash at it, and then kind of so this was like a couple of rounds, or like one round. This all happened, and then come back on the next round, his crossbow had a flare kit, or a flare option, so he loaded a flare into the crossbow and shot the flare into the room, and he manages to get a critical hit. So this is where that light damage thing kind of came up. So this flare lights up this room, he does a ton of damage, and then I just had it kill the spirit in one shot. So he rolled enough damage to do so, but since it was light damage, I had it just like evaporate. And he really loved this. I think that this was a pretty defining moment for him as a player, because this was his first real tabletop role-playing game release session, like a really true tabletop experience, especially since it was in person. And I think this really sunk in the like, holy cow, this is fun. This is something that's worth, spending my time doing. I'm having a lot of fun with this. So that was really exciting of a moment as a game master to be able to improvise that scene, because he had so much invested in it, and really making it pay off well for his character, and to just feel good as a player. When we did take a break partway through, and I did get the comment, I was trying to kind of push things through and run it in a quicker time frame, and he had said, I don't want this to be over in another 30 minutes. I'd like this to keep going. So that's where some of that extra time came in at. And it was good. It was a very good first session for him. The next secret and clue is Big Game Hunter. Gideon is known for hunting big game and rare creatures. He has an armory filled with traps and weapons on the second floor, 2 rifles, 1 bear trap, and a large machete. And I think I had Sir Reginald mention that this was upstairs, and they kind of fled upstairs. That's where he got picked up one of his weapons, because he was previously unarmed, as were the rest of the NPCs. Elixirs abound. Gideon is paranoid and known to keep various potions and elixirs hidden around the manor in case of emergency. So on a successful investigation check in a room, they can find an elixir. Now, since we were having a Halloween-themed board game night, I went above and beyond with this one, and I went to the liquor store and got a couple of small, like little mixed bag of different little alcohol shot type things that look kind of like potion bottles, threw them in a bag, and whenever they found a potion, I let them draw from the bag, pull out a flavor, and that was their potion. And then in Index Card RPG, there are different loot tables, and for this one, I had them roll on the Epic Loot Table, which is like the most powerful gear you can get in ICRPG. And I had it just basically, it was all gear, but I just converted it to be the effect of the potion, right? So one of them, it like doubled their health. One of them to pick a milestone up, like basically like level up. And essentially what I did was I just had it last until the end of the session. So did two things for me. As players, they get a fun little, real world mini game that they get to play. And then two, they get this like super high powered effects. But for me, since it's temporary and only lasts for the night, I don't have to worry about if this turns into a long-term campaign. I don't have to deal with, having handed out super high level gear early on in the campaign. So no worries there. That was a lot of fun. Favorite taxidermy. Gideon keeps his favorite taxidermy trophies in a room on the second floor. That's, again, where they found the key. And that just, I don't know, that just worked out well. Some of this information is just little bits of lore about the location. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that crazy in depth. Occult library. There's an occult ritual spell book in the library related to blood magic. So then I wrote down blood magic tome, sacrifice 1 HP when casting a spell to make it easy. Nobody really had spells, but the players did pick this up, and I used this in our second session, which is more of a session 0. I will talk about that in a future video. This did come up because I had the players get framed for the events that happened during this session. And the fact that one of them was carrying around this blood magic tome made it extremely incriminating evidence to have it on their person, which was great. So that was able to then, we'll kick off for the next session of them being imprisoned, which is something that they had all expressed interest in doing a prison break. So I had to imprison them somehow so they could do a prison break. One thing to mention too, in that zombie encounter, the groundskeeper runs in, and he ended up getting killed by the zombies in like the second round of the game. So they also got blamed for his murder, and they got blamed for his murder, for having occult material, performing occult rituals, and then like destruction of property because they trashed Gideon's house. And the last one is the Blackwood Diary, a written journal describing plans to awaken an ancient horror through blood magic. I ended up placing this in the coffin at the end of the session. This was the one clue that they didn't unlock during the session. And I wasn't planning on having Gideon in the coffin anyway, so they took out all the candles, the ritual kind of dropped, and then they were like ready to just jump whatever was in the coffin. Actually, one of the characters basically like just started beating on the top and like breaking the top of the coffin apart. And just inside is the diary, which then leads us to where was Gideon Blackwood this night and what is his next move, right? So this then has kicked off a full-fledged campaign, which I will talk about more. Like I said, we've got that session 0 that I would like to talk about. We'll do that in a separate video. But if anybody's interested in running a Halloween-style one-shot, feel free to steal this. Take what you can from the podcast episode. If you want to support me and become a patron, you can go over and grab my notes, which is what I'm reading off of, so you can more easily run it, as well as links to that YouTube video for the soundtrack, or a soundtrack, and the map that I used. So feel free to use it. And with that, I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the Halloween season and the inevitable Halloween one-shots and themed sessions that will be coming up. So thank you guys for listening, and I will catch you guys in the next one.